Every morning, millions of people wake up with a heavy mind, not because something bad has already happened, but because something might. The weight of what-ifs, the shadow of uncertainty, and the fear of failure are like invisible chains, tying down the human spirit before it even gets a chance to rise. Worry, for so many, has become a habit, a daily ritual that drains energy, paralyzes progress, and dims the light of possibility. And yet action, the very thing that could liberate us, waits in the background, often ignored, often feared even more than the thing we're worrying about. There is something deeply human about worry. It's rooted in our biology. It's part of our survival system. Thousands of years ago, worry kept us alive. It kept us alert to danger, to the rustle of a predator in the bushes or the threat of a rival tribe. But today, we don't face those same primal threats. Instead, we face deadlines, judgment, expectations, and the haunting thought that we're not doing enough or that we're not enough. Our brains haven't evolved to distinguish between real and imagined threats, and so we treat every challenge as life-threatening. But here's the truth. Most of what we worry about will never happen, and of the things that do happen, we're more than capable of handling them. So why, then, do we stay stuck? Why do we let worry run our lives while action sits on the shelf like an unopened gift? Because action demands courage, action requires commitment, and action, unlike worry, has consequences. It makes things real. When we act, we risk failure, judgment, and change, and for many of us, that's terrifying. But what we forget is that inaction has consequences too. In fact, the price of inaction is often greater than the cost of trying and failing. Inaction breeds regret, and regret is far heavier than failure ever could be. To stop worrying and take action, we must shift our mindset. We must learn to see worry not as a sign to stop, but as a signal to start. When we feel anxious, it's often because something matters to us. That anxiety is pointing us toward what we care about. It's revealing our values. But instead of channeling that energy into endless rumination, we must redirect it into movement. Even small steps can create momentum. Even imperfect action is better than perfect hesitation, because once we start moving, clarity follows, confidence grows, and worry begins to shrink in the face of progress. Simon Sinek teaches us that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The same applies to ourselves. We must reconnect with our why, our purpose, our mission, our reason for getting out of bed in the morning. When you are deeply connected to why you're doing something, action becomes natural. It becomes meaningful, and worry begins to dissolve because the mission becomes more important than the fear. The focus shifts from what if I fail to what if I never try. That's the real fear. The fear of never becoming who you were meant to be because worry convinced you to stay still. Action is the antidote to worry, but it's not just about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's about choosing courage over comfort, choosing movement over mental paralysis. Every time you take a step forward, no matter how small, you're telling yourself a new story. A story of resilience, a story of growth, a story of agency. You're proving to yourself that you are not a victim of your thoughts. You are the author of your actions. We live in a world where overthinking is celebrated, where busyness is confused with productivity, where planning is praised more than progress. But planning without action is just a form of worry in disguise. It's a way to feel in control without actually changing anything. True growth begins when we move from the safety of thought to the risk of doing. And the truth is, the more we act, the less we worry, because action brings evidence, it brings results, it brings feedback. It gives our brains something real to work with instead of just hypothetical scenarios. Think of any great leader, innovator, or visionary. None of them got where they are by worrying their way to success. They acted, even when they were afraid, even when they weren't ready, even when the odds were against them. They took the first step, and then the next, and then the next, and eventually they became unstoppable. Not because they had no fear, but because they refused to let fear have the final word. You don't need all the answers to start. You just need a reason. You don't need the perfect plan. You need the courage to take the first imperfect step. Progress is not about leaps and bounds. It's about the discipline to keep moving, to get up when you fall, to try again when you fail, to believe in the possibility of change, even when the evidence hasn't shown up yet. This moment right now is your opportunity to stop being a prisoner of your own mind, to stop letting worry rob you of peace, potential, and progress. You are not powerless. You are not stuck. You have the ability to choose. To act, to create, to build, to become. The future is not something that happens to you. It's something you shape, one action at a time, and so the question is not, what if I fail? The real question is, what if I fly? What if this action leads to growth you never imagined? What if this choice unlocks doors you didn't know existed? What if this is the beginning of a story worth telling? The time for worrying is over. The time for waiting is gone. The time for action is now. If there's one thing you must understand, it's this: you don't need confidence to take action. You gain confidence by taking action. We've been conditioned to believe that we must feel ready before we move, that we must eliminate all doubt before we begin, but that's simply not how it works. Readiness is a myth. Certainty is an illusion. Every courageous act in history was done by someone who was afraid but chose to move anyway. Action doesn't come after fear disappears. Action is what causes fear to lose its grip. Worry is the thief of momentum. It slows us down before we ever get started. It convinces us that every path leads to disaster, that every move is a mistake waiting to happen. But momentum is powerful. The hardest part of any task is starting it. Once you begin, even if you stumble, even if it's messy, you've already broken the spell of paralysis. You've shifted from theoretical to practical, from problem to solution, from stuck to in motion. One of the greatest lies we tell ourselves is that thinking more will solve our problems. But thinking without action is like revving an engine without putting the car in gear. You burn fuel, but you go nowhere. The people who move the world forward are not always the smartest in the room. Often they're just the ones who are willing to start, willing to look foolish, willing to fail in public, willing to try again. They are not fearless. They are simply disciplined. Discipline beats worry every time because discipline gives us structure. It tells our minds what to do when emotion clouds judgment. It gives us a foundation to stand on when fear threatens to pull us under. And discipline isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's the daily choice to do something that aligns with your goals even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. Every time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how small, you're building internal trust, and that trust is the fuel for greater action. You may be waiting for motivation to strike, but motivation is fleeting. It's unreliable. What you need is clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of values, clarity about what you stand for and what kind of life you want to lead. When your why is strong, the how becomes easier. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be clear about why it matters, why this goal, this project, this change is important to you, and if it matters enough, you will find a way. If it doesn't, you'll find an excuse. We often look at successful people and assume they have something we don't: talent, genius, luck, but most of the time what they have is resilience, the willingness to take action, fail, learn, and try again. They don't worry less than you. They just choose not to let worry dictate their choices. They understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward in spite of it. Fear is persuasive. It speaks in your own voice. It uses your insecurities against you. It says, you're not good enough. You'll embarrass yourself. It's too late. You don't have what it takes. And if you listen to that voice long enough, it becomes your truth. But it's not the truth. It's just a story, a loop your mind has rehearsed so often that it feels real. You have the power to break that loop, not by fighting it directly, but by taking a different action. A new step, a counter move. Every time you act in spite of fear, you're writing a new story. You must become the kind of person who takes action not because you feel brave, but because you've decided that progress matters more than perfection. That doing something is better than overthinking everything. That living a life of intention is more fulfilling than avoiding discomfort. There is power in simply starting, in sending that email, making that call, writing that first page, speaking that truth, showing up even when you feel small. That's how giants are made. one small step at a time. There's something else you must recognize. Taking action doesn't mean doing everything at once. It doesn't mean fixing your whole life overnight. That's another lie worry tells you, that if you can't solve it all, there's no point in starting. But the truth is, change is built in layers, habits, routines, skills. They're all developed gradually. You don't climb a mountain in one leap. You do it one step, one breath, one decision at a time. And here's the key. You already have everything you need to begin. You don't need to be smarter. You don't need to be more experienced. You just need to trust that action will teach you what worry never could. Worry keeps you stuck in your head. Action puts you back in the world, where real feedback lives, where real growth happens. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes. But the moment you move, the moment you act, you reclaim your power. Remember, perfection is the enemy of progress. The need to get it right the first time is a trap. No one gets it right the first time. Or the second, or sometimes even the 10th, but they keep going, they iterate, they evolve, and that's the difference. Worry keeps you stuck on the sidelines, action puts you in the game. You will make mistakes. You will fall, but you will learn, and that learning is what builds strength. There's no version of your future where everything works out perfectly without risk, without discomfort, without challenge. That version doesn't exist. The only real future is the one where you decide to show up and do the work anyway, to face the uncertainty, to embrace the discomfort, because that's where growth lives, that's where transformation begins. You will never feel completely ready, but you can be willing to try, willing to fail, willing to stretch, and willingness is more valuable than readiness because willingness leads to action. And action leads to change. That is the secret, that is the path, that is the way forward. When you look back on your life years from now, you won't remember all the moments you spent worrying. You won't celebrate the nights lost to overthinking, or the opportunities you missed because fear convinced you to wait. You will remember the moments you moved, the moments you stepped forward when it would have been easier to stay still. The conversations you started, the projects you finished, the chances you took not because you knew they would work, but because you refused to let fear win. The world doesn't need more people who are waiting to feel ready. The world needs more people who are ready to take the first step, to be brave enough to act, to speak, to build, to change, because action inspires, action leads, action creates, and every time you act, you give someone else permission to act too. Your courage becomes contagious, your progress becomes a light for others, you stop worrying not only for yourself, but to become an example to others of what's possible. You have a choice. You can continue letting worry run your days, letting fear write your story. Or you can take back the pen. You can start writing a new chapter, one where you act in alignment with who you want to become, one where you chase meaning, not perfection, one where you embrace effort, not ease, one where you define yourself not by your fears, but by your actions. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, it will be messy, but it will be worth it. Because action brings growth, growth brings purpose, and purpose makes life worth living. The voice of worry may never fully go away, but you can choose not to give it the final say. You can hear the doubt and still move forward. You can feel the fear and still press on. This is your time, not tomorrow, not someday, today. The world is not waiting for your perfection. It's waiting for your presence. It's waiting for you to show up, to contribute, to lead, to try. The smallest step you take today could become the turning point of your life. So don't wait until everything makes sense. Don't wait until the fear is gone. Start with what you have. Do what you can. Begin where you are. Because when you act, you are no longer a prisoner of worry. You are a creator of change. You are not here to merely survive the storm. You are here to learn to dance in the rain. You are here to move, to rise, to act. And when you do, the future will open. Not all at once, but step by step. With every decision, every risk, every bold, courageous move forward, stop worrying, start acting. Your future is waiting.